Is that family mostly?
Yeah, that's family. And the one right behind me is a watercolor that I did out in Utah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. Where in Utah?
It was Dead Horse Point State Park near Arches and
Yeah.
Canyonlands, Moab. It's in Moab. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
They used to anyway, have a plein air festival every year. And anybody could pay their $45 and get in. So I did that. And how are you, Amy?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm okay.
Hello, Barbara and Kate.
It's 2. How many people do we have here?
Six.
John Friedman.
Barbara's talking to her dog, I think. You're muted, Barb. We can't hear anything you're saying.
There we go. Hi, everybody.
I
Trying to
think we have
figure.
3, 4, 5. We have 5 people here out of Nicola, are you on?
She's
Yes,
recording, so
I'm here.
Do you know if we expect a quorum? And is a quorum 6 or 5?
6. We do have 6 members present.
Oh, okay. So then why don't we just get started? Let me call the meeting to order. And the first thing I have to do is to read a sort of an abbreviated version of this script about the electronic script. First, because each member of the Exception Review Committee is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each Exception Review Committee member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you're participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. And we'll start with Barbara Ryan.
Hi, Barbara Ryan. I'm participating from my home.
Okay. And Amy Gould.
Amy Gould, Annandale, Virginia.
Okay. And Ed Monroe. Ed Monroe is not answering. Kate Flynn. Kate, I think you're here. Well, let's skip Kate and come back to her.
I think she's muted.
Yeah, let's see if I can unmute her. No, I can't.
Kate, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Kate? Can you unmute yourself and say your name and where you're calling from? Let's come back to Kate.
There should be a picture of a microphone on the top of your screen or on the bottom of your screen. And if you just click on that, there should be a line through it if you're muted and a not when you're not. So if you just click that, that should work.
I usually do Zoom.
Okay.
And I have never successfully done Teams before. I am participating from my home in Reston, Kate Flynn.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate. And Alexis Dickerson, I believe, is not here. Mary T. Smith.
I'm here.
Okay, and where are you calling in from?
Falls Church.
Okay, and I'm Betsy Martin, and I'm here in the Mount Vernon district in Alexandria, Virginia. And David Schneer.
Yeah, I can hear you all, and I'm in Burke, Virginia at home.
Okay, thank you. And Sam Govender. Okay, no Sam. So we have, there's Mary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, including me. So we have a quorum. And now, since the vice chair is not present, I will pass the virtual gavel to the secretary, Barbara Ryan, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Exception Review Committee. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All
Oh.
agreed? Please, I guess, raise your hand or, okay, so everybody can hear everybody else. I
Yes.
think we've taken care of that little bit of business and we can move on to the first topic in our meeting, which is the review of the previous meeting minutes from November 1st, 2023. Does anybody have any revisions to the minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve them.
Okay,
second.
all right, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. And then we have next, we move on to topic 2, which is a discussion with the staff on amendments to the county code to incorporate amendments adopted by State Water Control Board regarding first, the preservation of mature trees, second, sea level rise and coastal resiliency, and third, to consolidate the stormwater management and erosion and sediment control regulations. And I'm not sure which staff member is doing this presentation, but wherever they are, I hope they'll speak up. Yes.
There we go. My computer is revolting and being very slow. So I hit the unmute button, but the computer didn't register it in time. So I'll start again. Jerry Stonefield, Land Development Services, Site Code Research and Development Branch. I'm gonna share my screen, but then turn off my camera to try to save as much bandwidth as I can to speed this up here.
Okay, and maybe we should turn off our cameras and our mics as well.
I don't know if that's necessary, but it's usually just on my end.
Go for it, Jerry.
Oh, well, all right. I'll go. I didn't turn off my camera, but once I shared my screen. Anyway, so just verify that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Should be a PowerPoint presentation in the full screen, not my notes version.
Yeah, we see it.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. Staff is working on an amendment that we're going through the process. No, that's not working. I should be able to advance the slides here. No, that's not it either. I just inserted a slide. I am so sorry. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
Looks like
No.
you're
When I can go faster than the computer can, that is a bad sign. There we go. So this is in response to 2020 legislation from the Virginia General Assembly. They amended the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, specifying that the state Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, amended the act to, or they amended the act telling the staff to include two provisions in the regulations. Provision about the preservation of mature trees and a provision for coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise and climate change. It was a very short one sentence addition to the act. DEQ took that, developed regulations, and then in 2021 brought those to the State Water Control Board as two separate amendments to the state Chesapeake Bay regulations. The State Water Control Board adopted those and specified localities have 3 years to amend the local ordinances. They were also going to update or provide guidance. They have not done that yet, finalized it anyway, but the clock is ticking. We have until September of next year is the end of that 3-year time period. So the mature trees is relatively minor of the two. They are adding some additional language to the regulations. We'll have to amend the ordinance just to add mature trees when we talk about preserving trees and where necessary or where they are allowed to be removed. When you replant trees to the maximum extent practicable, as opposed to shrubs and ground cover, or you can't do just shrubs and ground cover. Staff has analyzed this, and we don't think that this is going to amount to a significant change in applications or planting plans because of our Chapter 122, the Tree Preservation Ordinance, and Public Facilities Manual specifications when it comes to planting, replanting RPA buffers. So it is an editorial change for the most part to add mature trees and a couple of phrases here and there. But substantively, we don't think this is going to make significant change in what's required.
Jerry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What does this do for just a private landowner, not on the water or anything at all? Not part of our responsibility, but just some homeowner wants to take down a 70-year-old tree.
Within the RPA, they still need to have county approval for the removal of dead, dying, or diseased trees or noxious weeds. And we require that when they're removed, they be replanted with other vegetation that's equally effective in the buffer functions. And usually that's a 1-for-1. If they cut down a tree, replant a tree, type of thing. Now, the replanted tree obviously is not going to be a 70-year-old tree, but they still have to go through that process. That process doesn't change. It's still required in its administrative approval. But this is because of our languages in 122 and the PFM, which was amended a couple of years ago on the RPA buffer requirements. Functionally or substantively, this is not going to change for those conditions.
Barbara?
Jerry,
And it sounds like in answer to David's question, it won't affect landowners who aren't in the RPA. Is that correct?
Outside of the RPA, well, in Fairfax County, the land area that's outside of the RPA is a RMA, resource management area. So when the state language says Chesapeake Bay preservation areas, they mean both RPAs and RMAs. Minimum RMA width is 100 feet from the RPA. When the county first adopted it, we decided we weren't going to delineate a separate RMA boundary and just made all the rest of the county RMA. So there is not a distinction on that. But no, outside of the RPA, they would not need approval under Chapter 118 to remove a tree.
I see
So,
Amy has a question.
Okay.
Oh, Barbara has a question. She was there before me.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so just to clarify, the scope of this is within RPAs, Jerry, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then within RPAs, my question has to do with how would one define where necessary? And is there any guidance given to that? And in particular, I'm thinking about some of the very large kind of sewer pipe and stream restoration projects that are currently going on in Fairfax County, where upwards of 500 mature trees are being taken out for individual projects. And how would this affect those type of projects, if at all?
Okay, the where necessary on the PowerPoint slide is a shorter version of the language that's actually in the regulations. I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it memorized. It's you can only remove trees, mature trees, where it's necessary to establish the proposed use. So if it is necessary to do that sewer work, a lot of sanitary sewer trunk lines are in the stream valley because they're gravity flow systems, so they have to flow downhill. This would not prevent that. If it's necessary for the construction of the project, they could be removed. But where they're removed, they need to be trees need to be replanted to the maximum extent practicable. Because if it's not practicable to replant the trees, it's not necessitated by this language.
Thank you.
And as I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see who else has their hands up.
Amy has a question.
Right. Well, the mature tree thing is always a conundrum for me because the value of the mature trees can't be replicated with smaller trees that are planted. Even if you're putting in 3 times as many, it takes the 30 or 40 years for it to have the same value. And the thing that I feel like people at the county don't address or don't seem to understand, and it's a source of frustration for me, is not only are we losing our tree canopy at record amounts, but we all, the carbon capture, the metric tonnage that every mature tree holds is pretty unbelievable. So when you're cutting down a tree, you're not just losing the carbon capture that the tree does, but you're also spewing metric tons of carbon back into the atmosphere. And so that's just a concern of mine because I don't think that we're really addressing that. But it is a major problem, and it's always to the extent practicable or extent possible. And it's very frustrating for me that this isn't being taken a little more seriously by staff. That really does concern me. So that's just my 2 cents. And I agree that with what Jerry said about the stream restorations and the sewer under the streams, in many cases, it's very difficult for them to do. It depends on what stream restoration they're doing. I know I've had that conversation with people in stormwater planning myself, And it does depend on what kind of a stream restoration they're doing, but if it's a full-blown deal where they're replacing infrastructure underneath the stream, there's nothing else they can do but take the trees. And that's a big problem as well. So, thank you.
Okay, let's let Jerry continue.
All right, okay. Moving on then. Maybe, nope, too far, sorry. So second amendment that the state processed, why they did it is two, I'm not sure, because they did it at the same day to the State Water Control Board. But if you, these hyperlinks are to the Virginia Register version, so you can see the strike through what was taken out and the underline of what was added to the state regulations. They are two separate actions. But anyway, so a new provision in the state regulations, 25.831.55, requires coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise. This is a new requirement that will apply to any encroachment into the RPA. And we require consideration of the impacts of climate change. They specifically list out sea level rise and storm surge. It will require a resiliency assessment. We are proposing that it be incorporated into and part of the water quality impact assessment. And then based on that assessment, we could require conditions based on the consideration of those impacts, including using best management practices. There is another change that creates as an allowed use, which is Article 2 of the ordinance, meaning that I hesitate to use the word, but I will, by right, subject to approval of a water quality impact assessment and other criteria for adaptive measures. And I'll get to that in more detail in a moment. And then, of course, the state threw in some other provisions in there as well. So the resilience assessment. So we consider impact of sea level rise and storm surge for a potential impact range of 30 years from the time of the application, unless what they're proposing to build with the requested encroachment is not going to last 30 years. And then they can have a shorter time frame for however long that temporary, well, I'll say temporary use. Don't ask me for an example. I don't know why somebody would build something that's not expected to last 30 years. But we use models and forecasts that are developed by the state. State has in the regulations 4 different models or sources of information. The sea level rise, storm surge, and then the flooding, special flood hazard area as defined by FEMA. We're proposing this to be part of the water quality impact assessment as opposed to a separate plan type or additional submission, but it would be something that the applicant prepares to meet the criteria and then submit that. And based on that assessment, conditions or alterations or adaptation measures could be required as a condition of approval. The adaptation measures is a new allowed use, subject to criteria, of course. They have to be a nature-based measure. There is a few different sources of what approved practices are. Virginia BMP Clearinghouse is one of those sources of previously approved practices. So it's not necessarily something that you're making up. They have to be designed, installed, maintained per those specs. You can only use fill and under very limited circumstances. fill has been one of those issues that some further, I'll say, southeast jurisdictions that have a much flatter, wider area next to the coast have struggled with folks bringing in fill just to raise their yard areas to try to be above high tide in some cases. So there is some strict limitations on that fill. And then there's other conditions of preserving existing vegetation, and of course comply with all federal state requirements. Did I hear somebody trying to ask a question?
Yes, this is Mary. Going back to the coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise, how do you really implement that sort of thing? Any one particular project may not do that, but cumulatively, a lot of projects could have an impact. And how do you go about doing that kind of assessment?
The assessment is actually the other way around. What
Okay.
they're looking on is the impact of sea level rise on a 30-year horizon on the proposed project. If they're proposing something that today is in the RPA and would be dry, but in 30 years, given the amount of sea level rise, would be impacted by that higher water surface. They're saying that they need to include that or consider that impact now and design the project to account for that, so that in 20 years or 30 years, they don't have to come back in and do an additional or re-encroach or re-impact the RPA to rebuild the structure to mitigate the impact of that sea level rise. So they're looking for that, consider that now, rather than build it to just barely above and then have a problem within the lifespan of that structure or use. So
Jerry,
it's
this is
not.
Dave. I
Go
don't know
ahead.
how to, oh, all right, ignore it. Go ahead, Betsy.
I was gonna ask, is this going to rely upon the coastal inundation models that VIMS and NOAA have developed, the maps, or what will the
Yes.
basis be for the assessment? Okay.
Yes, those are the two examples of models developed by or for the state. NOAA is and eventually I will get this acronym right. The acronym is SLOSH. It's Sea, Lake, Ocean, Surge from Hurricanes, or something like that. And what that is a model where they've taken multiple scenarios of different hurricanes, different category hurricanes, different landfall locations, different directions, and just run model after model and take a accumulation of the worst case of all of those to develop where that storm surge would be for that. And VIMS also contracted out to come up with projected sea level rise and developing a GIS-based application so that you can zoom in and find out where the projected sea level rise is for various scenarios. The regulations are baked in the intermediate high scenario. And then, so we're looking at a 30-year time frame from the time of the application.
I see David has a question.
Yeah, Jerry, I've been looking at this morning. Based on historical trends over 120 years, over a 30-year period, we're looking at a 1/4 of an inch rise in sea level. The models that have been used have been shown to be defunct because the climate sensitivity numbers have been wildly wrong. and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has admitted as much. And so if we're using what NOAA has been using, which is the intermediate I, we're looking at something that is simply unrealistic by any empirical measure. In addition, our county is 300 feet above sea level. And even at the Potomac, the few properties we have along the Potomac that have issues, and we had one before us at the last meeting, the surge level and sea level is not outside of normal variability from storms. So I'm wondering how we address this in the context of actual empirical data, where we have good reason to believe that the modeling approach that's been chosen is in error.
That is a tough one, because the state regulations require that the county utilize the models and forecasts that were developed by the state. So until the state changes those models, we're kind of stuck with them. I
right.
hear what you're saying, but that's the regulations there. We were during the state process to amend the regulations. We were actually asking for the locality have the authority to do that, because our Fairfax County was working on, or just starting to at that point, work on some additional modeling, but that's not necessarily baked in here. I could double check to see if we could, if we had something different, if we could request approval to use that, requested from the state before we started accepting those other alternative models. But they would have to be, in any event, blessed by the state. And until the state recognizes that, I'm not sure we would have too much success, but we could certainly try.
All right, I'll take that as I understand it, and I appreciate your response. Now let me pursue a different.
Well, hold on. You had a second part to that question. Let me address that. Yes, there are vast majority of the county is far above sea level. This would not have really any impact to them. However, the way the regulations are worded, any encroachment into the RPA has to have a resilience assessment. The problem is that the resilience assessment is only considering such things as sea level rise and storm surge. It does not take into impacts of, say, change in rainfall, which is a big part of climate change. This resilience assessment does not take that into account. So the only properties that would have any additional impact to assess would be those down along tidal Potomac, or some of the tributaries that are tidally influenced, Doe Creek, that type of thing. Or where a storm surge from a hurricane would have some impact. And that's storm surge, that's not just inundation of additional rainfall. So yes, there is in Fairfax, I think it's a very limited scope or area of properties that this would impact.
Got it.
And before you ask, I will say other folks have asked that we develop a map. That is on my to-do list to work on, as far as just a general location of where this is got that impact.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. The other question I have to do with remediation efforts. The tradition has been discussed, and I've discussed this with members of the legislature and local officials down in the Tidewater area. The presumption is a seawall is the approach that would be best used especially in industrial areas. And it doesn't sound like, if people say you can't do backfill or fill, what about seawalls? What about a structural approach. Because I don't know any other way to deal with it, other than
Alright.
accepting that you're gonna lose your land.
Well, let me go to the next slide, because that is one of these other provisions that they, nope, going the wrong way here, sorry. Oh, too far. I will get this eventually. So, some other provisions that they put in there is the projects must comply with tidal wetland guidelines that the state has developed. And there's a whole paragraph on project must meet the living shorelines. That was a change a couple of years ago. Living shorelines is a very specific concept of vegetation approaches to along the shore. It is the change, several changes, but I will say the big change was previously it was projects need to consider putting in a living shoreline. The change a couple of years ago was projects must put in a living shoreline approach unless they can prove that the living shoreline concept will not work at that location. Living shorelines have a vegetation approach and a very flat slope. They are not hardened shorelines, not seawalls, not riprap, not your traditional structural approach. So I
They
wish I had.
can, Jerry, living shorelines can include things like offshore sills built out of rock. So it does include some kind of structural approaches, with the idea that that would break the wave action that would be eroding the shoreline, for example.
Yes, there are some components that I'm not saying it has to be all plants, but it's not your traditional seawall or in the entire embankment is large, huge boulders type of thing.
Right.
I don't have an example of that or pictures of that at this point. I'm sorry about that. But I was just jumping to that because that's get to Mr. Schneer's comment of the approach project. So there are some conditions on that. The slope of the property is one of them, and that does have some limitations on when there are some parts of the county that are on higher bluffs that would not meet that flat slope type of a project. So this was just another provision that they threw in there, more of I'll classify as belt and suspenders type of approach, because there are already existing provisions about living shorelines. They were just throwing that into the Sea Bay regulations as well.
The thing that if you take a look at Wikipedia, not that that's a brilliant source, but if you just look at it in terms of what materials can be used in a living shoreline, they're extensive, and they can include using clean dredge material and sand fill to construct a slope. They include breakwaters and filter fabrics and geotextile material tubes, low crusted rock sills. All of those have to do in large essence, including rock footers and rubble and recycled concrete are to form a breakwater. All of those are considered part of the materials you can use for a living shoreline. So if somebody comes in and offers something that's different than what some engineer decided in Richmond, I think we may have to seriously consider it.
Well, we wouldn't be getting living shoreline projects. Those would be shoreline stabilization. It would be going to the wetlands board and not to us.
depending on the scope of the project. But yes, the wetlands, assuming that this would be in the tidal wetlands, yes, there would be a joint permit application required for not just the Wetlands Board, but also VIMS and, depending on the situation,
Yeah.
Corps of Engineers for wetlands permits.
VMRC, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, VMRC.
Well, thank you for this presentation, Jerry. It will be interesting to see how this resilience assessment plays out. Um,
All right, well,
and
last bullet on this slide, the exceptions cannot be granted. This is a limitation on the county for encroachments into the RPA. Can't grant the exception if this resilience assessment has not occurred, and cannot grant an exception for fill that is outside what's the limitations that are in the regulations. This is more of a bigger issue down in, I don't want to say specific jurisdictions, but ones that have down on the coast that have larger, flatter lawn areas where I've heard it described as colloquially as soggy sock syndrome, where folks' yards are actually getting inundated at high tides. And there's been issues, allegations, complaints of them bringing in fill, spreading it over their yards to elevate the yard above the high tide to keep ahead of or above sea level rise. And this provisions in the ordinance specifically do not allow that type of fill to be approved. There could be fill if it's part of the shoreline project that's part of those specifications. Another example would be if it's a project in the floodplain and they're getting the appropriate approvals to be in the floodplain, but to elevate the structure to be above the flood elevation, that they could put that fill in there for that floodplain regulation approach with the appropriate floodplain approvals. But for what fill is necessary there, but not for just lawn areas.
I see
And then-
Amy has a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to read that last bullet. Clock is ticking. We have till September 29th, to be specific, to have our ordinance in place. So we are in the process now. Oh, too far. So we're doing the outreach, and then we're looking for authorization, public hearings beginning of next year. And then the September is our target for the effective date.
And Amy had a question, but you're muted, Amy.
Yep, so my question was, there was something in the agenda about ENS controls being merged with something. So can we talk
Yeah.
about that?
That's another presentation.
Oh,
Separate
sorry, I thought it was
item.
part of this. I apologize.
No, that's a wholly separate thing.
Okay.
So we can,
Okay,
if any other questions on this, we can tackle those and then switch gears.
Anybody got any more questions before we move on to stormwater management and erosion and sediment control? Okay, Jerry, why don't you go ahead?
Well, actually, I was assuming that was not me.
Oh, okay. Well, whoever it is, please raise your hand. Speak up. Well,
It's John Friedman, that would be me.
Oh,
Give me
okay.
give me a second to get it set up here.
Sure.
John's on the same county issued type laptop, so I'm sure his is just as slow as mine.
All right, so here we go. So I guess the state has consolidated the Virginia Erosion and Sediment Control Law and the Virginia Stormwater Management Law, which required subsequently consolidation of the associated regulations. So in addition to combining the E&S regulations and the stormwater program regulations, they also included the erosion and sediment control and stormwater certification regulations. Those are the regulations for individuals that are certified to review plans, do inspections. The intent of all this was to eliminate redundancies and correct, differences between the E&S sediment control regulations and the stormwater management regulations. And trouble with my pointer here. So the act doesn't require us to combine our existing E&S and stormwater management ordinances, and we're not planning to do that. The premise behind the consolidation of the regulations was that there's no substantive changes to the minimum standards in post-construction stormwater management technical criteria, except that there was a change to the exemption provisions for single-family detached residential structures that was included in the law, and I'll get into that a bit later. So under the current law and regulations, the county created a limited exemption from both stormwater quantity and quality controls for single-family detached residential structures where the land disturbing activity is greater than 2,500 square feet. That's the point at which you have to submit a grading plan. Now, under the new law, quantity control is required, and the county may only exempt land disturbing activities for single detached residential structures from water quality control. At some point in this presentation, I'm apologizing in advance. I have trouble. Sometimes I say quantity when I mean quality, and vice versa. But it's the quantity controls which we can no longer exempt. but we could still exempt these structures from water quality controls. This is a little bit more detail on the limited exemption. And so it's total impervious area less than 2,500 square feet or 18% of the lot area, whichever is greater, or the total lot area is a half acre or less and no more than 500 square feet of new impervious area will be added. We're not really seeing very many of these that come in under the second provision, and because usually when you're only doing, no more than 500 square feet of impervious area, you're not actually disturbing more than 2,500 square feet. So you typically don't get into this. But the county can keep the existing limited exemption, and again, but it was only for quality control. We've had some preliminary discussions with the board about this. And we're going to be giving them an additional information based on an analysis of the past exceptions that have come in under the stormwater management ordinance. Because of the fact that we have the adequate outfall provisions that we're already requiring quantity controls on infill lot grading plans. Not being able to use this exception any longer has virtually no impact on that. And we think that the impact of getting rid of the water quality exception provisions will also have limited impact, because a number of the measures that are provided for water quantity control also provide water quality control. And if push comes to shove, the water quality control may be provided using credits from a nutrient bank. This is one of the points that, was brought up by the board when we discussed that with them, because the nutrient credits from these banks, they're all outside of the county limits, and they don't really provide any specific benefit to the county water quality, but they do provide a benefit to the overall Chesapeake Bay water quality, which of course is what the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance is intended to do. But we will be providing the board with more information on, by going through all of the exceptions, kind of on the size of the projects and how much it would cost if they were to get rid of the water quality control exemption. Because the board is very sensitive about the additional costs and the review times for these infill development projects. So the E&S control ordinance and the stormwater management ordinance need to be updated to be effective by July 1st of 2024. So at this point in time, that gives us a little over 6 months. Again, there's minimal substantive changes to the technical criteria, and water quantity control is required for all land disturbance equal to or greater than 2,500 square feet. And again, the board will be deciding on the water quality control part of it. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. And before we open it up to questions, I have a request. Could Mr. Friedman and Mr. Stonefield, would you mind providing your PowerPoint so that we can link to it and we can have them available in case we didn't get all these details written down in notes? And also, Jerry, if you don't mind, you had hyperlinks in your presentation to the register version of these laws, but of course we can't see the hyperlinks because we can't click on them. If you'd mind putting them in the chat box, that would be helpful so we could actually look at the language that you're referring to. Thank you. And now we can open it up to questions or comments.
I will try to put them in the chat. I tried that on an earlier presentation and was not able to actually post the whole file to the chat. If all else fails, I will provide them to Nicola and she can email them out. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, that'd be fine. And I see Amy has a question.
Well, I'm not sure that Amy has a question. I have serious concerns about generally the lack of enforcement on ENS controls. And I say that because if any of you have recently driven by the Erickson site over on Braddock Road, the inspector who I reported the problem to told me it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. And, you know, I just really wonder if we're going to be changing all these rules, but there's still no enforcement involved, then water quality quantity is going to suffer from that. And so without an enforcement component or mechanism or an increase of enforcement, or are we just going to say all the developers are so good and so wonderful and they are going to comply with everything? They don't. In reality, I drove by that site and could not believe what I had seen. And I have been involved in other ENS issues as well and have reported them over the years. And I find that this county is very lax in that. I understand wanting to move things forward. I understand wanting to make the developers' dreams come true. That's where we are right now in this county, and that's okay. It's just that there has to be, if we're going to give them all of that, then we also need to do some expectations of what we expect when they are building, that they watch for when their fences are overtopped with sediment, that they actually have somebody inspecting those sites on a regular basis. So I just want to go on the record as saying that because it is a source of frustration for me and has been for the last 15 years of my life. And so I'm just mentioning that in my context of having been involved in other issues here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any thoughts on that, Jerry or John Friedman?
I was just kind of curious, Amy, did the inspector that you notified circle back with you and tell you what he'd done?
He went out to the site. I mean, John, it was pretty, I mean, I actually took some pictures and I have pictures I can provide you if you don't believe how bad it was. It was one of the worst things I had ever seen. And part of it was a VDOT responsibility because VDOT was, you know, crunching back the curb as far as they could, which was not what the design was. But VDOT stepped in and decided they were going to push it back even further. And so the soil was, the pictures when I drove by, I tried to get pictures and it was very difficult. There was no place to pull over because there were barrels in the lane. And so there was no place to move like you normally could. And the pictures I got looked like the dirt was in my car window. It was that close to the cars driving by. And it was impressive. They had done a very good, the irony is they had done a very, very good job until they ended up out at the street level. And that's where it all fell apart. And it was torrential rain that weekend, by the way. And so I look at the water quality and water quantity and the fact that there was not a damn silt fence anywhere to be seen on that roadway. And I find that unbelievable. And I do think that the guy driving the truck that was doing all the work could have done a better job at trying to control some of that. And so my problem with all of this is that we can change the rules, but without enforcing it and without being serious about enforcing it, people are going to get away with what they can. And if they know they can get away with it, they're going to. So that's just an observation that I make. And again, I know that we're very accommodating. The inspector, actually, I called him because I wanted to do a follow-up with him. And I called him to send him some pictures that I had taken down there at that site. And he said to me at the time, it was one of the worst cases he had ever seen in his life.
Okay.
So
any other follow-up questions or comments on John Friedman's presentation. Okay, hearing none. I believe, thank you very much, Jerry Stonefield and John Friedman, for your presentation. It's good to hear about these developments, to know about them before the fact. And now let's turn to topic 3, which is Camlin is going to give a kind of an RPA 101 presentation. And this is partly to benefit the several new members of our committee who have, not been tromping around in these RPA situations as long as some of the rest of us have, and to sort of give us some familiarity with the law and with the calculations and so on. So, Camlin, are you present?
No, she is not. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bin Zhang. I am one of the branch chiefs with Site Development and Inspections Division. I am filling in for Camlin today because she's on leave, who was supposed to be filling in for Matthew, who was originally planning to give this presentation today. So as I understand it, the topic I'm going to cover today, one is to go over the presentation that Matthew gave to the Planning Commission Environmental Committee a couple of 2 months ago. And then I heard from Camlin, there's a follow-on request to go over the VRM spreadsheet that staff uses to demonstrate water quality compliance. So those are the 2 topics I'm going to go over today. Let me first share Matthew's presentation. So I guess our discussion goal for this particular meeting is to talk a little bit about the general overview and purpose of the Sea Bay ordinance that I kind of think you all know about it, and then the different types of exceptions that is allowed by the Sea Bay ordinance, and the involvement, the different roles of LDS staff, Board of Supervisors, the Environmental Committee, and Planning Commission. I guess the next bullet item is something, a new process that I don't think I'm going to go over today. Okay, so type of developments in the RPA. So the Sea Bay ordinance, of course, the intent is to protect the water quality in the county, protect all the streams, protect all the natural resources areas. But there are exceptions you can request to do some kind of improvements or developments in the RPA through these exceptions. Basically, there are different articles in the Sea Bay ordinance. There are Article 2, Article 3, Article 5, and Article 6. So all the exceptions are under those 4 articles. Article 2 pretty much defines the allowed use in the RPA. That is an administrative, can be approved administratively. Allowed use basically means if you already have something in the RPA, when it's established, you can continue use it, or you can redevelop, or it also includes water-dependent uses. For example, you can your storm sewer outfalls would have to be located next to the stream, and that is considered an allowed use in the RPA. And those type of requests are submitted under Article 2 of the ordinance. And Article 3, I'm moving to the 3rd row on this table. Article 3 is typically what we refers to as the woodlot management exceptions. That is when you're requesting to remove vegetations in the RPA, it could be dead or invasive species, or it could be you need to remove some of the vegetation to for vista view. If you're living next to a lake and you want to create some vista, you can so that you can see the water from your house. That is also managed under this article. So that's Article 3, which is also a administrative review process. And Article 5 has several components to it. Article 5 has section 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5. So our 5.1 is existing non-conforming use. So if you haven't used in the RPA, you can continue use them. We are not going to ask you to demolish those structures or uses. Article 5.2 and 5.3, which is in the fourth row on this table, those are exempted uses. So if you're under those categories, you don't need to apply for an exception with the county. It's automatically exempted by the ordinance. So those include public utilities, site and amenities for passive recreation. Typically, that's just all I've seen is just trails. If you want to propose a trail across the stream bank, that's approved under 118.5.3. And for public utilities, that kind of also extended to private utilities. For example, you have a electrics, gas lines, sanitary sewers. Those are all covered under the utility section under 5.2. And 118.5.4 is for loss of buildable areas. And that is if your lot was created before the creation of the RPA. If you have a pre-RPA lot, you're eligible to apply for this loss of buildable area, so you can build a reasonably sized house in the RPA. And one caveat on that is that the structure has to be located outside of the 50 feet seaward. And then there's 118.5.5, which is for minor additions. So if you have a pre-RPA house and you want to add an addition, probably a deck or expansion of a house, a sunroom, those can be applied under the minor addition. And everything cannot be approved under Article 2, 3, or 5 falls into Article 6. Those are the cases that needs to be reviewed either by the board, the planning commission, or the environmental review committee. So that is 118.6.7, 118.6.8, 118.6.9. You could see a variety of different applications. It could be a loss of buildable area where they want to put a house within the seaward 50 feet. It could be accessory structures, like a pool, sport court, a patio. Those are all considered accessory structures. So those are the typical types of applications we see. I kind of already mentioned that if you are applying for anything under Article 2, 3, or 5, those are going through administrative review by LDS, and we're just going to issue an approval letter, or if we have comments, we're just asking them to correct things that needs to be corrected. Everything else requires a public hearing, either through the Environmental Review Committee or the Board of Supervisors if there is an associated rezoning case. And this nice picture here, just kind of give an example on where the RPA core components is as defined in the ordinance. RPA core components includes perennial streams, wetlands, floodplains, and coastal wetlands. Of course, we don't see a lot of those in this county. So, and then the 50 seaward is defined from the edge of the perennial stream or the edge of the wetland, and we require 100 feet of buffer from perennial streams or wetlands. That's the 100-foot buffer. And once those limits and delineations are established, then we can determine whether the proposed house or the proposed addition or the attachment structure is in the RPA or not, or is it in the seaward 50 feet. So we know which category of the exception we need to put the application under. So the next slide just gives a little bit more description of all the allowed uses under Article 2. Water dependent uses would include storm sewer outfalls, docks, other features that must be in the RPA. I guess the most common we see are the ripraps associated with outfalls, and we see docks in Lake Anne Western area. Redevelopment, the limitation is you cannot encroach more into the RPA, and you cannot create more impervious area. So if you have an existing shed in the RPA and you want to change that to a patio, it needs to be at the original location. You can't encroach into the RPA further, and the footprint of the patio cannot exceed that of the shed, so that you're not adding more impervious area in the RPA. So all the allowed uses must also comply with the performance criteria of Article 3. So the general guideline is you cannot disturb more land than necessary, and we also require a water quality impact assessment, and establish buffer areas where it's necessary. Article 5 exceptions, this listed what can be done under 118.5.4 and what can be done under 118.5.5. There are some square footage restrictions on both type of exceptions. I'm not going to read all of them, but they also both applications also needs to comply with Article 3. So no more land can be disturbed than the minimum necessary, and it will also require vegetation buffers. For example, if you are applying under loss of buildable area and you're disturbing a certain area in the RPA, we typically is going to ask for that same area to be established as buffer somewhere else on the lot near the RPA or in the RPA, preferably to be near the stream or where the core component is. So then this is the Article 6 exceptions. You could get them for loss of buildable area if you're building a new house that was on a existing lot, and if you're encroaching into the seaward 50 feet, or if you're building on a lot that was created after the RPA establishment, then you also need to be under Article 6 instead of Article 5. And then accessory structures can be applied under 118.6.8. That also depends, A or B is depending on the age of the house and date of the RPA. There are also some restrictions, like the 100 square feet or 2% of the lot area to be eligible under this 118-6-8. So anything not eligible for 6.7 or 6.8 would be under 6.9. So in preparing the staff report for these ERC cases, staff go over the required findings as outlined in 118.6.6 to A, B, C, D, E, F to provide the committee a opinion from the staff on whether we think the applicant meet or does not meet a certain finding. So the first one is if the request is minimum necessary to afford relief. The second one is, does it grant special privilege to the applicant? Number three is it a substantial detriment to water quality? Number D is the situation self-created and self-imposed? E, reasonable and proper conditions are imposed. We always include attachment A with our staff report if we recommend approval of a we always include an attachment A whether or not we recommend approval of the application. Just attachment A is a condition that we think would be necessary for the committee to consider if the decision is to approve an application. Number F is what other findings we may have observed during our review of an application. So about the different roles, I already said some are reviewed by LDS staff. That's an administrative process. Some are reviewed by the Planning Commission. If there are associated zoning cases, that's like rezoning, special exception, special permit. And then the ERC reviews all other standalone cases that requires public hearing. I'm not going to describe the proposed change for the process. I can take any questions the committee may have on this presentation before I go into describe the water quality spreadsheet.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions?
Yes, I'll continue then.
Go for it.
Okay, so I pulled the summary VRM spreadsheet from two of the applications we had recently, and I'm just going to use those as an example to explain the information put in there and how staff verifies them and what is our basis of our analysis. So
it's almost impossible to read that, Ben.
Okay.
At least for me, that's better.
I have a very big screen, so I don't know about you.
I have a small screen.
So this spreadsheets most of the applicants uses are developed by DEQ. They published this along with their 2014 stormwater management ordinance that it is used as a tool by the designers and reviewers to the designers use them to demonstrate compliance with the water quality requirements that is associated with stormwater management ordinance. So most of the applicants for ERC cases also use the same spreadsheet to demonstrate they are not creating a water quality detriment. So the setup of the spreadsheet is kind of there already. A lot of the cells and tabs are locked by DEQ, so a lot of the information cannot change. Yeah, for example, you can't change the formulas they put in there on how the nutrient load is calculated. There are only a couple of cells that you can put your input in the spreadsheet, and then the spreadsheet is going to give you a result on your target phosphorus removal rate, and you put in your BMPs in there, and the spreadsheet will tell you, does the BMPs you proposed puts you where at a position that you meet all your requirements. So they have two spreadsheets. One is for new development and the other is for redevelopment. Most of the cases you all probably see is redevelopment because there aren't so many people trying to develop on a entirely vacant lot. It's always, most of them are redevelopments. But they do have two different spreadsheets. The way they calculate their phosphorus removal goal is a little different. If it is a new development, you have to reduce enough of your nutrient so that your nutrient load is less than 0.41 pounds per acre per year. I believe that number is based on an analysis of the like a baseline analysis DEQ did and determined on the number. I don't know all the history about the number and what kind of analysis they did about it, but that's the target nutrient load they want if it's a new development. And for redevelopment, they understand the lot has already been disturbed and there might be already existing impervious areas on it. So it might be unfair to ask the applicant to use the criteria for new development because it would probably cost a lot if you want them to comply with the same goal. So they have this redevelopment spreadsheet developed. Basically, it had the basic difference is on the redevelopment spreadsheet, you can put in your pre-development land cover, and then you put in your post-development land cover. So they are trying to do the evaluation based on the improvements you are making to the current condition. So the first input on the cell is the total disturbed acreage, and this number is going to affect the amount of improvements DEQ is going to require you to accomplish. For example, if you are disturbing more than 1 acre, they want the improvements to be 20%. So you need to reduce the existing nutrient load by 20%. If you're disturbing less than 1 acre, which is most of the ERC cases are, if it is less than 1 acre, they require you to improve the nutrient load situation by 10%. And all those are all built in the spreadsheet, so you don't have to manually change the 10% or 20%. So for example, this particular example, the disturbance is only 0.05. And you can see the compliance target is 10%. Maximum percent reduction required below pre-development load is 10%. This is all automatically built in the spreadsheet, so you don't have to enter this number at all. And then the important input data is the pre-development land cover and post-development land cover. So there are three categories they put their land covers under. One is forest open space. That is typically if you have a good RPA buffer, all trees, natural vegetation, you probably be that's the type of land cover that you would put under forest open space. Managed turf is just a regular lawn grass condition. And an impervious cover, of course, is your buildings, your driveways, accessory structures. Pools is also considered 100% impervious. Patios is impervious. So in the county, we consider anything that has been compacted to be impervious surface. Gravel driveway is something people ask sometimes, but gravel driveway is also considered impervious. So, and then the input also differentiates the different hydraulic soil groups. This is based on the county's soil map. The hydraulic groups are divided into A, B, C, and D. They all have slightly different rough curve numbers. So this is also automatically built into the spreadsheet. So only the cells I highlighted can be changed by the applicant. So you do analysis of like how much is your site area, and what is the current land use and what is the proposed land use. And this is the total site area they're using in their computation. So in this particular case, you can see the pre-development condition. It is managed turf. So it's probably an area in their backyard that is currently grass. And then their proposed condition is, it seems they have put something as an impervious area, and they put the other areas as forest open space. So this can be interpreted as they probably wants to construct a patio, a small patio, but would compensate the patio by establishing a buffer area in the RPA. So so staff is going to verify if their area is correct. If they claim they are doing this much of forest open area, did they do it? Do they have an associated planting plan with it? We're going to verify these numbers and make sure they're in the right cells. And then the spreadsheet does the calculation. So for this case, you can see in the summary tab. This is the summary tab. It says total phosphorus load reduction required is a negative. This is a negative number, which means they have converted enough of their managed turf area to forest open space to be able to meet their total phosphorus load reduction requirement. So that by doing this, their reduction requirement is negative.
Could I stop you for just a second? Could you point to the place where it shows the total phosphorus load that must be reduced? I don't see it in what I'm seeing on my screen. Where is that?
You see the negative 0.029?
No, I can't see. I see two things that say pre-development and post-development. And then the rest of the table at the bottom is covered up by my menu.
Is this better?
Yeah.
You see my mouse?
Could you? Yeah. It's on managed turf.
Oh, managed turf. No, that's not right.
Yeah, for some reason, Ben, your mouse is not hovering over the space you want it to.
Make sure
It's the fourth table down, Betsy.
Okay. Oh, I see. Total TP load reduction required, pounds per year. minus 0.0290. Right?
Yep, yep. Do you see my hand like at the very left of that row? No?
No, your hand is off in the left somewhere.
Ah,
Sorry.
strange.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Now I see.
I'll read the text so you can find it.
Yeah.
And then the applicants typically just print out the whole thing. And this is the complete summary tab directly from the VRM spreadsheet. And you can see there's also a cell where there's a green text next to it. Says target TP reduction exceeded by 0.029 pounds per year. That's an indication that the applicant has met their water quality requirements. If they didn't, there will be a red text saying that you still need your reduction. You still need a certain amount of reduction to meet your water quality goal.
Thank
So
you for that.
this is one of the examples that doesn't have any BMPs. They meet their requirements solely by providing a vegetation buffer in the RPA. So all the other tables are kind of 000 from here down. So I'm not going to go there. I found another example, which is even smaller because they put it on one full-size sheet. But this one proposed, I'll try to zoom in. I'm not sure if what I see is what you see. They used a BMP facility in this particular application. Do you see the same kind of table, input table, where there's a total disturbed area, pre-development land cover, post-development land cover? See the tables?
I do.
Okay.
The
So
total
in this
disturbed area
case,
says 0.42 acres, right?
yeah, yes. So this is also a case that is less than 1 acre. So they need to reduce their pre-development nutrient load by 10%, as well. The other similar to the other cases. And then in their pre-development land cover, they put 0.63 as managed turf, and they have an existing impervious area of 0.06. Right? And then in their post-development land cover, they have a managed turf area of 0.52, and they increased their impervious area to 0.17. So this is a case where they probably have an existing impervious area, but for some reason they need to enlarge it. And now I'm scrolling down to where the summary is. Do you see the text I highlighted where it says TP load reduction required?
Yes.
Okay, so in this case, they increased the impervious area a little, and their target TP load reduction is 0.24 pounds per year. And the way they demonstrated compliance is using the drainage area tab of the spreadsheet. So this is a drainage tab, drainage area A. I hear echoes. I mute someone.
Maybe the rest of us should turn off our
I think it's good now. So drainage area A is the area they are intended to go to the designed BMP they're putting on site. So it seems they're trying to treat 0.13 acres with a rain garden. So this is also all preset in the spreadsheet. I can show you the real spreadsheet in a little while. But this is all already entered in the spreadsheet. There are certain BMPs that is accepted by DEQ, and they assign all the removal efficiencies. So you can't really change this number by yourself. It's all locked by the Excel. The only input you put in here is how much impervious area and how much managed turf is going to this practice. So these are the two input cells. And then the only other input cell you have on this row is you can treatment train the BMPs. For example, in this case, they said the downstream practice is 4B. And if you go to 4B, it's a grass channel with C or D soil. So it seems they're proposing a rain garden on site, and the discharge from the rain garden is going to go into this grass swale to have some additional reduction. And you can see on this column where it says phosphorus removed by practice, that's the third column from the right. That's the amount of reductions provided by each BMP. In this case, the rain garden is going to provide 0.25 pounds of phosphorus removal. And then their downstream practice, the grass channel, is going to provide 0.01 pounds. And then they have this summary sheet where if they printed this in color, you would see this highlighted text in green again, saying the target TP reduction exceeded by 0.02 pounds per year. Any questions on these examples before I show you the actual spreadsheet?
Seems pretty clear. Your explanation seems pretty clear. There's an awful lot of stuff in this spreadsheet.
Yep, but a lot of them you just don't care about. You only care about a couple of input numbers, and we check if those are correct and consistent with the plat they provided. So I'm going to switch to the actual spreadsheet just to give you an idea how it looks like. I can also provide a link to this spreadsheet so you can play around with it. You can even enter the numbers you see from the application package and see if it calculates to be the same.
That would be helpful.
Sometimes we'll do it. So this is the spreadsheet developed by DEQ, and you can only enter where it is green, right? And all the other gray cells are locked. So data input cells are green, and all the other calculations are done by the spreadsheet, by all the formulas behind it, and you don't touch it. So this is the land use tab. And at the bottom is the TP load reduction required. So this is the goal you're going to need to accomplish. And then they have DAA through DAE. That is intended to be used for bigger projects because you could have multiple BMPs. So it's easier if you break them into drainage areas. Like drainage area A could go to a rain garden, drainage area B could go to a infiltration trench, and they could all go to different places. But most of the cases for ERC only have one drainage area. These two tabs are not very relevant to us. Excuse me. I guess then just look at the summary tab. We already see this. Their printouts are mostly from this summary tab. This is the format we shared with you in the two examples, where they have the summary of what has been done, And then most importantly, they have kind of a conclusion. Where's the conclusion? Is the conclusion up here? Or maybe because we didn't enter any data, so the conclusion is not shown. Oh, here.
The
It's right
drainage
on the top.
areas compliance
Yeah.
summary.
Yeah. So if everything checks out, this is where you're going to see the green text, the runoff reduction target has been exceeded, or by 0.0, even it's 0.00, we consider that they have demonstrated compliance with the water quality requirements. So this is the tool staff use and designers use to demonstrate finding number D, your D or C, the one that says the proposed exception is not a detriment to environmental quality, to water quality. Hey,
Well,
any questions?
Thank you for reviewing this. I find it very helpful. I hope others do too.
I found it useful. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for filling in for Camelin and Matt.
Yeah, two people.
And I think the link would be useful because it was very hard to read the text on my little laptop screen. And I'd like to sort of see what happens when you put the numbers in and see the calculations come out.
Yep, I'll put the link in the chat.
Well, thank you very much. And do we have any more questions? Are we ready to adjourn? Oh, I think, I believe there was another item on our agenda, which was to set our next meeting date. But I'd like to defer that, which is because Matt had sent me an email about the topic that he thought we might want to talk about. But truthfully, I wasn't quite clear on what the topic was. And so I think it might be better if I talk to him and then he and I can figure out when we need to schedule our next meeting. If everybody's okay with that.
I am.
So
Me
I
too.
think we're down, we've been meeting for an hour and 45 minutes. So could I hear a motion to adjourn, or if anybody has any other comments they want to make on all these topics, that would be fine too.
I move we adjourn.
Thank
and
you.
I second.
Okay. Thanks to everybody. And have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the
Thank you.
staff.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for everybody.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, staff.
You're welcome, Betsy.